And welcome, everyone. We are Tilson Live. I am Eric Allered. So grateful you're joining us. Please, as you hop in, tell us where you're joining us from. We got folks coming in already from Kerrville, San Antonio, Brenham, Texas. So grateful to see everybody. I'm Eric Allered, Tilson Homes, Senior Vice President of Business Development, because we got another Senior Vice President on here today. But part of the fourth generation of the Tilson family. So grateful you're joining us today. I am joined, as we are each and every week, by our Director of Marketing, the one and only Dawn Dantzler. Say hello, Dawn.
Hi, everybody.
And so today, my gosh, we got people here. People have cell phone service. This is fantastic.
I know. Well, we're getting people from other states and everything.
They have. Well, other states would make sense today. Everybody can see us except where we are. So we have a very, very special guest today. And so for the very first time, please welcome to Tilson Live, Mr. Justin Ordeneaux, our Senior Vice President of Construction. Welcome, Justin. How are you?
How are you doing? Hello, Don.
I am great. Thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule. I know that you have kind of a lot going on right now. So for those of you that watch this at a later time, this is February the 16th. Texas is completely frozen over. And Mr. Ordeneaux's team is doing everything they can to service the customers that we have. He oversees, obviously, not just construction, but our entire customer care division. So they're very, very, my gosh, we have a lot of people joining us today. Isn't this great? Probably all of our employees that are working from home as well. I see a lot of them are going to be joining us, which is pretty awesome. But before we get too far into this, Justin, I want you to tell us, well, first of all, I will do some introduction because he's going to be a real humble guy and won't talk about this stuff. But so Justin Ordeneaux serves on our executive team alongside me and half a dozen or so other folks that are out there to try and make you guys have an awesome experience along the way. Justin's going to tell us how long he's been with us and all that kind of what got him into construction, what he likes about construction and building homes for people, and why in the world he'd want to do it on someone else's land. So Justin, please tell us who you are, where you're from, how long you've been with Tilson, and what's going on, man.
Well, Eric, thank you. It's fun to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. So, I actually got involved in construction when I was very young, kicking around job sites, picking up trash at different points. Had a family in New Waverly, Texas, kind of adopt me, the Novark family, and they were a third generation framer. So was able to work for them for a few summers and during the after school hours, so that I got my education at Sam Houston State University. And I knew at that point that I wanted to go into residential construction. I really enjoyed the process and seeing activities going on the job site every day. So it was just kind of a natural fit for me. So I went in, I was able to get a job learning as a superintendent. And then I joined the Tilson team about almost 15 years ago. Where I started out as a builder. I did that for many years and then moved into the vice president of construction for the Gulf Coast region. And then after that, as you know, our predecessor was moving his way on out the door and had an opportunity to take on all construction across the state. So since then, it's nothing but looking forward, I guess.
Yeah, man, it's been a lot of fun. A lot of fun getting to know you, getting to work alongside you. I've learned a whole lot. About construction, about how to work with people. So anyway, looking to many, many more years together without hair. So this is going to be a good time for all of us. Dawn, I hope you try and stay on task. Sometimes Justin and I can get a little.
I know.
All right, so guys, y'all, hey, listen. Put in the comments any questions at all you've got about construction, about building on your land. We are going to get to those in the chat. We hope everybody is. Maybe you're warm. I hope you have power. I hope you have running water. Some of us do.
I hope you're staying off the roads.
Yep. We're grateful that you can't smell anything via Facebook or YouTube, because I would give about anything for a hot shower right now. It will be awesome. That day will come. This too shall pass. So anyway, without further ado, ask the questions. We can't wait to see where everybody's coming from. We got folks from everywhere.
We've got Mark from Germany. We've got a lot of people in warm states who are bragging about it. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I see somebody from the Sunshine State. That must be nice. Must be nice.
Sunshine would be nice.
Yeah, it'd be good. All right. So without further ado, Justin's going to kick us off on this presentation. Don's going to share that up. But we are today, guys, going to talk about construction process and practices, why we brought such the most capable guy in the company, quite frankly, and probably the state of Texas, because we hire the best. So
Absolutely.
Talk all about construction, but next I want to show you a little bit about why should you even listen to what we have to say. That has to do with how long we've been doing this. So the next slide there does talk about our 89 years that we've been doing this. So again, then this, guys, the whole point of these videos that we do, whether you build with us or not, obviously we'd love to have a shot. It'd be an honor, but whether you build with us or not, we want you to be armed with the most relevant and accurate information possible when you're building a custom home on your own land. And since that's all we do all over the state of Texas, we really feel like you're going to get really excellent information here from us, just not only with our experience, but also the practices that we do. We were founded in 1932. We've built over 40,000 homes on average, actually a little over this now, thanks to Justin's team. Over one family a day is moving into their new Tilson home. And Justin's team is completely and wholly responsible for that. So let's moving on along. What are we going to be talking about today? We will cover all of these things, but we're going to be talking about your plot plan, maybe your site plan a little bit, your floor plans, foundation plan, soil reports or geotechnical investigation, different kind of permits, what kind of fees are associated with those permits from time to time, what type of energy codes we get along with, community requirements, scheduling, windstorm, and probably a whole host of other things that y'all will ask us and we will go answer. So anyway.
Yeah, this is everything we're dealing with when you're kind of wondering what's going on.
Yeah, there's a lot happening. And by the way, guys, there's a different video that we do all about the upfront part, getting it designed and ready to go. This one's specifically going to be about actual construction. So, Justin, I don't know anything about construction. I want you to do all this.
Oh, Eric, I know way better than that. You know quite a bit about construction. I appreciate how much you and your team know about construction. So it's very helpful on the other side of it, getting the actual home built. So I really appreciate getting the opportunity to do this, because there's a tremendous amount that goes into this, the preparation to getting to the point of actual construction of the house. And we're not the only partner in this, if you will. So we have got utility companies and all those things that we're researching up front. Ultimately, what our goal is not just the home, but the long-term vision for what you're going to do on the property that you own. And so we want to partner with you from the day we meet to kind of better understand what all you're going to do, so that we can maybe make those things easier as we move along. So we're going to talk about utilities and water, septic, sewer, and explain what those are and what it takes to achieve those, and some considerations for future development on the property. Specific to the property, the big thing is wanting to establish power. And so what you're going to find is that you might have something close by that the co-op or the power company could connect to get power established to your property. And here, this is a great picture of, you'll see way off in the background back there, a transformer. And then you see multiple poles that are coming over to feed what we call a temporary pole. And so this is the first steps in really making it to where we can access the property and be able to perform on that job site through construction. There's going to be a lot of considerations about where this needs to come in at, how it attaches to the house or a future structure or existing structures. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that during our stakeout process. It's never a bad idea, and the stakeout or site evaluation department is going to meet you out there. But if you can contact those companies, if you happen to know who they are, and start talking to them about what that takes to get power established, it's great to know a little bit of information. If not, we have a wealth of resources that we can tap into as well to help guide you on who to contact and some considerations as far as easements, where to bring it in, which side of the property potentially to bring it in on, or if we have to adapt to what's already existing, we can do that as well.
Yeah, and just I can interject real quick. This is kind of what really separates the production subdivision world from on your lot, right? Like, so talk a little bit about maybe why someone would need to do this, whereas in production, why would they not have to mess with all this?
So, depending on your property, anything from an infill lot to possibly 100 acres or more, whatever the size of that property, you might have designs for something to come in later, such as a pool, maybe a casita that we offer, right? A shop, any type of improvement that you're going to want to have brought in. In the subdivisions, you really don't have the capacity on the lot for an additional improvement. But knowing that you have that option, we can set up early on to make those features coming in less costly, easier to navigate, make it easier for the next guy that's coming in to build that improvement, so that he's not having to overcome obstacles that we've created for him. So for instance, if you're going to put a pool in your backyard, you don't want to run the electrical line right in the middle of where your pool is going to go. Or if you're going to build a shop, you want to add power out to it. We need to start talking about possibly the size of that transformer or the size of the service that would be able to accommodate both the house and what you're going to be adding on to the property. So showing up, and as I said, when we get to the stakeout, we'll discuss a little bit more about that. But bringing in power and having an idea or concept around what you're wanting to do there and who to call is always great.
Cool.
The other thing is we're going to help you determine if you're going to need a well or if you're going to be on public water. Sometimes you might have an option. It's not common, but sometimes you will have an option which direction you want to go. So when we first make that site visit, you're going to see our guys speaking to you ad nauseum almost about how this would come in and some minimum distances that are required if you're going to have a septic system or some other feature on the house. If there's existing fence or if there's cattle next door, if there's trees that are fruit bearing, there's all these rules that we start to have to incorporate into the design of your property to serve that vision. So this is another feature that we're going to talk to you about in the site evaluation and help you realize more about your property than what you might already know.
Sure.
So here is the on-site sewage facility, or septic, as some people will call it. Sometimes this will be managed by either the city or the subdivision, but usually speaking, for what we do, we're going to see that we're going to have to add these giant tanks that are in the bottom right-hand corner. They're going to warehouse that sewage and disperse that appropriately. And so each of these actually has to be permitted and they have to be pass inspections. And we also need to make sure they're properly sized. So then the last utility that we will briefly touch on is if you're going to use gas, whether it be natural gas or propane. And so here we have a couple of different options. You'll have, for propane, you can have a tank that's exposed above ground, or they do actually have an option to bury this. So it changes whether you're going to rent the tank or you're going to purchase the tank. But then on the natural gas side, they'll have a line somewhere in close proximity that generally we're going to trench to, or we'll have to have trenched to the home, and then a meter will be associated and connected to that. So these are things that, as we get into the stakeout part of the process, which is done very early on, will help you make some determination or give you some ideas for consideration as we move through the process.
Very cool. Hey, Don, you want to pause here for a couple of questions that have stacked? No, you go to the next slide, Jess. I'm sorry. But I know some questions have stacked up here, and I'm going to give Justin a chance to field this stuff, shortstop style.
Absolutely. So let's see. Crystal and Derek are asking if Tilson provides builder's risk insurance, or is it something we need to look into ourselves with our homeowner's insurance?
How does that work, Justin?
The homeowner does not have to buy builder's risk insurance. We provide that. That's included.
Yeah. Big differentiator between us and a lot of custom builders. They do not.
Correct.
So, yeah. Great coverage. So like, if the house is under construction and freezes or something crazy.
Everything
like
freezes.
that.
Yeah. That'll never happen though. So you'll be okay. Yeah.
And that's also clearly stated in our COS, if I'm not mistaken, Aaron.
It is. Yep. It's our responsibility. All the general liability, builder's risk insurance, and workman's comp for our employees is included.
Absolutely. And then a friend from YouTube is asking if site evaluation is part of the price of the home, or is it additional?
We include that in the price of the home. So again, in order to partner with you, we want to come out there. We want to know what we're going to have to do and start making decisions on things or options that we can provide you. Because you have an idea, and then there's going to be some variables that are going to come about that may cause, because of the property, we're going to be upfront and honest with you about, hey, here's some things we have to consider when we're starting to apply your vision onto the property that you purchase. So no, we go out there as part of the process.
Okay.
Awesome.
And Jose is saying, hey, Justin, stay safe and warm.
I will soon. I get to go home tonight, so just for the crowd, I actually have a broken water pipe, so I get to go deal with that this evening. So I'm anxious to go get my plumbing on today.
Man practices what he preaches.
Absolutely. Sophie is asking if we recommend owning or leasing the propane tank.
That's up to you. If you're going to bury it, they're going to most likely make you purchase it. I don't know of any propane companies that will lease it, but if you want it buried so that you don't see the giant tank, you're going to end up purchasing it. They last forever. They reuse them all the time. So if you want to rent it, you can. You can obviously purchase the above ground as well, but it's kind of a personal preference, and we can help you make those decisions, but that's up to you.
And as they wear out, they make great barbecue pits.
Yes.
All right. Rebecca is saying that she would like to build a rock wall, but wants to add a room off the third bedroom and a door leading to it from the outside patio. That room would be closed in with a door like a media room. What say you, Eric?
Yeah, we can do that. It's it'd be kind of interesting to only have the access from a covered porch. That'd be a little bit different, but it's not to say it couldn't be done. If it had that, it may have to have a window in it too. I don't know. I may defer that to Justin, but I don't know if you can just have the one access from an actual living space just be onto a porch. But yeah, I mean, if that's what you're looking to do, we can certainly do it there. It sounds like maybe Rebecca doesn't want it to have to go upstairs to a media room of any kind.
Okay.
It's set up to have one already in the rock wall, but if you want it all on the same floor, that's certainly an option. Another option would be we could maybe move that bedroom back a little bit and make a hallway going to it so that it can be accessed from the house in case it drops down to like 9 or 12 degrees and you don't want to have to go onto the porch to get into your media room, which could also happen.
Yeah, could happen, as we learned this week. Audrey is asking, have we built in Lago Vista? She's heard utilities are difficult in that area.
Justin, is that a place that we've built homes? City of Lago Vista?
I think so.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, so kind of north of Lake Travis, we do. And I mean, look, the hill country is a little bit trickier about utilities anyway because of rock. So it costs more to put utilities in. So it's going to cost more for you to tap into those utilities for them to recoup those costs. And that's it's just part of the nature of the beast when you'll build out there. Yep.
And Jean is just saying hello. She's currently having her house built and loving the process so far. Thank you, Greg.
Oh, that feels pretty good.
And Julian is asking if we can put a light on the temporary electric pole.
That you can, and sometimes the power companies actually manage that for you. So there's a couple different options there, but something we could explore depending on what type of light you're wanting. But yes, we can get that done.
Okay. Mark is asking if any plan can have a garage added and what is the typical cost for a 3-car garage?
I let Dawn answer that one.
Yes, we can add a garage to any plan. And the cost, Eric, you're probably gonna have to help me with this one.
You're looking at usually around $15,000 to $20,000 per car, depending on the actual plan. So depending on roof pitch, elevation, what kind of facade it is it brick, is it stone, is it stucco? Is it hardy? So I would figure somewhere close to $15,000 to $20,000 per car, and it's going to get you really close.
Okay. And Heidi is asking, what is the typical cost for a propane tank if it's being buried?
I'm going to guesstimate about $2,000 right now is what I remember the cost. I don't price those all the time. We generally on utilities will connect our customers with somebody that specializes in that field. Obviously, you're going to sign an agreement where they're going to come out and naturally just refill that. They make their route and they'll just periodically stop by to make sure that you have plenty of propane. But we can certainly direct you towards some folks to get you some numbers that would be more accurate than what I'm providing you.
Okay, perfect. Sarah's asking, she already had her site stakeout and is wondering how long from final drafting does it take for concrete to be poured?
Ooh, well, it just really depends, Sarah, because they're, not knowing exactly where you're building offhand. I'm sure we can probably look it up, but you've got engineering is really part of the big thing that has to be done in that time. So after the stakeout is performed, the site evaluation, then we can order the geotechnical investigation, assuming the property is cleared and accessible with some type of all-weather access, which Justin will get to here in a minute. And then they'll design that foundation based on that geotechnical investigation. And then after that, we can get permits applied for and obtained. If there's an ACC or Architecture Control Committee involved, they'll want to see those plans and a site plan. So it can really depend, but your sales consultant can probably give you a better idea based on where you're building, how long that'll take.
Okay, perfect.
Johnny is. It's not a good segue. It's a terrible segue.
It's okay. We can segue from there. That's fine.
So since she asked, thanks, Dawn. Since Sarah asked about site evaluation,
let's talk about site evaluation.
That's a great idea, Dawn. I'm glad you thought of that.
So the site evaluation, it's I know there's a tremendous amount of effort that the customers put forth and we put forth to make sure that when we go to start into construction, that everybody has a game plan on how this is going to come together. And we really want to minimize the amount of deviations or things that we didn't uncover. And so we go through a lot of effort to make sure we uncover everything that potentially could come up and try and avoid any delays in the process of actually constructing the home. So to do that, one of the first folks that you're going to meet from construction will be our site evaluation specialist or stakeout personnel. And this picture kind of illustrates a relatively easy piece of property to develop. Pretty minimal trees, relatively flat from the photo that we're seeing here. But we're going to go through and we're going to talk to you about everything you're going to need to do to develop the piece of property. As y'all drive around, you notice developers and you'll see earth moving machines and all kinds of large equipment, setting up road and infrastructure, power, sewer, all of those things. We get the honor of doing that with you. And we're going to guide you as to what we need in order to make that happen. So the first thing you're going to need is a road, and we're going to move down through that in a little bit. And then we're going to talk about the utilities that we spoke about earlier. And we want to make sure that not only the house, because that's the exciting part, we know that, where we're going to place it on that property, but then how do we make all these connections to make the home functional? And ultimately, we want to make that as easy as possible. So when we meet with you, we're going to go through all of those aspects of what it's going to take to develop. Also want to know, again, long-term, what's your vision for the property? If you're wanting to add additional improvements, we'd love to know where those are going to go so we can kind of help set the stage. So for instance, electrical, if you're going to tell me that, hey, in addition to the house, at some point, we're going to need a barn in the back, or we're going to have that swimming pool. We might talk about some different opportunities for electrical to be connected so that those things can be incorporated easier later on down the road, rather than just placing the panel on the house. So we'll give you different ideas as much as you bring to us what your long-term vision is with the property. So the stakeout is essential that when we meet there, that you have some kind of idea, at least of what we want to talk about. And we're going to provide you some additional stuff. Once we leave there, we're going to have a long list of things that we have to bring back and feed into the other departments, whether that's our drafting department, maybe the sales department at times, cost control, just different departments that we have internally, so that we can build all that information into that file so that when the builder does get to the home or to the property, he's able to construct that home and make it very efficient. The other thing we're going to do, we're going to give you a little bit of information that you're going to need to tackle as well, or maybe some considerations. And that way we start really that partnership of, hey, let me provide you the number for the power company or who that propane company is that you're wanting. I'd love to do your septic system. So if I can take that on or do your well, those are things we'll talk about. Maybe we can lighten some of that load from y'all having to do. So then we're going to get one more slide. Here we go. So we were talking about the road, and there's what we're ultimately going to be bringing in. Very first thing is some very heavy equipment. We're going to be bringing in dump trucks that weigh approximately 40 to 45,000 pounds. And then we're going to be bringing in some concrete trucks that almost weigh double that. So this is a pretty road that you're seeing in this slide. It looks great. but this isn't what I need. What I'm going to need is I'm going to need material that looks like the size of a softball size. Some people will call it bull rock or crushed concrete. So I don't need a real pristine road to get in there. In fact, I don't want one. I want something that's going to hold up while I'm running those big trucks in. And then over time, once we're done, that same contractor that built this road can come back and put this finer material, this finer aggregate on top of that, and it will be just perfect and smooth and level. But our job is to compact that material to make it a solid all-weather road through construction. So the other thing that we're pointing out here is sometimes when you're crossing a ditch, which is very common in the front of the property or the rear, you'll have a culvert. And so we need to incorporate that in. These are things that Tilson can manage. If you want us to take this on, we know exactly what we need, and we have contractors that can get out to your property and make sure that these things go in for construction access. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about site clearing. Ideally, I love seeing trees. They're beautiful, they're great, and we know we're going to have to take some out a lot of times depending on how heavily treed the property is. But I really don't want you moving any trees until I come and see it. We do encourage you to underbrush. And in the background of this picture behind here, you see how thick it is. And there's a bunch of little 1-inch trees or vines or just what we call scrub brush. That can be extracted so that when we do go out there, we then can start setting up and really honing in on where you want your home. But the larger trees that you see in here, before you do anything, before you come visit us, leave those in place for multiple reasons. One, we might identify a better location for your house if there's a tree that you want to save. There might be opportunities that we can explore with the foundation to save a tree on occasion. But we don't want you taking out these great trees if we don't have to. And generally people that buy those type of properties, they don't want to see those leave either. So give us a shot to come out there on the site evaluation and help guide you on what trees will need to be removed. The other thing is when we make the decision to move a tree or take a tree out, there's also we're going to reference that to our engineer so he's aware of what was in the footprint of that home. And we're going to talk about that when we get a little bit more in depth with the engineering.
Yeah, that was definitely one thing I learned when I attended the site evaluation meeting for a customer was as little as possible, just movement of dirt before engineers get there. Because if they see any recently disturbed dirt, that's going to make them a little nervous and they're going to want to know exactly what you did in that area. So avoid moving dirt as much as possible without telling us what's happening.
Well, this is, Don, I mean, this is their forever home. So the more we know, and we do a lot of research, our engineer will do additional research on the property to see what's been done. But we want to make sure that we're putting in a foundation that is going to stand the test of time. And each one of those little trees, each one, if there's a fence line even down the middle of the property, believe it or not, where a cow was running up and down the fence, that compacts that soil and that can alter. And a lot of people don't realize that, but the more we've gotten to speak with our engineers, they tell us all these little finds that they have that really help incorporate into the design of that foundation to make sure we're doing the appropriate thing.
Yep, absolutely.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about the groundwork. So once we've met out on location, then we're making we've determined what we're going to do, where the house is going to go. We're going to do, I'm getting some feedback. Sorry, Eric. So we want to start thinking about long-term in that stakeout process, moving water away from the foundation. And the next slide, I believe, is a really good one that kind of illustrates, that's a couple down. But we're starting to determine what is it going to take to get water to run away from that foundation. So we're going to maybe get some dirt work in here to bring it up level. And we do have multiple ways that we go about approaching a foundation, depending on which region you're in. Sometimes it'll be the lot conditions. Rock, for instance, would be a different avenue that we explore if it's on the side of a hill, or if it's just a flat piece of property that has to be elevated out of a floodplain. So we're going to start talking about that and getting the groundwork done. So here we're going to talk about our foundation. We do use an engineer, MLAW, and they're going to do soil reports. And so basically what you see in the top right corner is our foundation engineering. And this is what that would look like in the bottom right, the actual picture. But by using the engineer, we're not just guessing at it. There is some prescriptive stuff in code, but really the engineer's goal is to go out there and design on your property specific to where your home is going to sit. And that's what's going to make sure that it lasts forever. And then we're all going to be sound.
Mm-hmm.
So the soils, you'll see in this picture here, they come in and they actually drill, and they're going to drill 2 locations inside the footprint of the house. Generally, they're on opposite corners. Believe it or not, in Texas, sometimes you can go from one side of a house to the other, and there will be a different soil type that we encounter. It has happened. But here, these guys are going to extract that soil, and they're going to send it back to the labs. MLAW has their own lab, and they're going to do all the research on that property on the soil report to make sure that we're engineering it correctly. So here's what we're looking at when we were going out to make that site evaluation. One, we're going to determine through that site evaluation, what is the best way to get water to not stand around that home. So as this slide will tell you, the shape of the home has a large amount of impact on what we do. We've had some that are U-shaped on the side of a hill, and that water will run straight into the front. So we have to make sure that we're elevating it correctly so that water will push away from the house and not into the front door and the garages. The other thing is we had this little thing called Harvey that we got to go through. We were in extreme drought, and we couldn't buy water to save our lives. And then all of a sudden here in Texas, we had this little thing called Harvey, where I think it was like 48 inches in a 2-day period, and we saw everybody flooding. Well, those soils through that, there was a lot of education that came to all of the engineers in and around this area. But those soils started really reacting because they were contracting as they were going through the drought. And then all of a sudden they were just saturated and they started to move. So the engineers trying to design around normal rain events so that they could manage that foundation can manage and work through those times when we have those different the events that are going on. Then drainage. And then we want to talk a little bit about the vegetation. So that's something else the engineer as well as our stakeout guys are going to be talking about, as well as how to get the vegetation away from or out of the footprint of that home. Mm-hmm. So they'll go through and do the site visit, the drilling, the geological map review, fault line review, and the aerial photo. So these are the things our engineers do in addition to what they harvest while visiting the site. They'll go back and look at these and reference these to make sure that if there was any activity on that property. For instance, we found one that there was a pool located on the property and they collapsed it in the back. So they tore out the old house. Nobody was aware that the pool was there 30 years ago, I believe.
Oh, wow.
So we try and uncover those type of things that might have existed on that property so that when we're designing the foundation, we know they're there, because it's different. Once you disturb that soil, it's different at that point, and you have to plan for it. So we do the liquid limit, plastic limit test. So these are things they'll bring back to MLAW labs, and they'll go through, they're going to look to see that, to make sure that the soil is going to support the foundation and what the design of that foundation has to be in order to support it. So you'll see that beam widths, beam depths will change. They change from lot to lot. They'll change from one area to the next. So the soils are really going to play a huge part of that. And the only way they're going to know this is by testing directly on your property. I do know of some that will take a neighboring home or a neighboring subdivision soil report and try and use that to make the determination of what that foundation needs to be engineered to. We want to go directly where that house is at. So that's why earlier, and Eric, I think y'all see it all the time, where customers are pretty amazed that we go out every single job to make sure that we have that engineering done on location.
Yeah, and that's why that site access is so important, right? I mean, it's not, there are builders who will just take the soil sample out of the ditch or off the side of the road because that's all they can get to. And I know we have a lot of customers that kind of wonder why do I need to have this construction drive and this culvert and stuff already in? And the reason is we want to get that big drilling rig you saw a couple slides back up onto your property, exactly inside the footprint of your home. We want to know exactly what the soil is like inside there and how it's going to react to moisture, lack of moisture, potential vertical rise, all this stuff that Justin's talking about.
Well, this is the PVR that you just spoke of. I mean, that all slabs in the state, I mean, they're designed to float somewhat, and it's only as good as that soil that's up there. But that engineer is going to make it to where those movements are seasonal, they're minimal as possible, and they're not deflecting. So all of that goes into this calculation to determine what the thickness of that slab or how deep the beams are going to be in that foundation. So now we're getting into more of the sticks and bricks. Did y'all want to ask questions at this point to this? Because we're really going to get into some sticks and bricks at this point.
Okay.
I'm game.
Sounds good. So let's see. I think we left off with Johnny. He was sharing his experience with propane tanks that he definitely recommends owning because it allows you to shop around for the lowest price. If you rent from somebody, you're obligated to buy from whoever you're leasing from. So that's a good tip there.
Nice. Thanks, Johnny.
Gabriel is saying, can you put the cost of putting a fence around the home in the loan as well?
If it'll fit in the appraisal, potentially, yes. Now, we don't have fencing contractors at the ready on our end, but if there's somebody that you have that you want to use and we can put an allowance for that in the loan and it will fit, potentially, but we mostly see that done after the fact, right, Justin? I mean, some people don't know exactly where they want their gates to be, and we certainly don't want to damage it prior to us completing the home. That would be our biggest concern. I mean, my biggest concern. Justin, could ever speak to that?
Yeah.
Correct. I would strongly recommend once the house is built, because we need some turning radius, depending on the size of the property. Obviously, you need some turning radius, and to be fenced in makes it it's just another obstacle to overcome. So ideally, it's done towards the end.
Okay. And we have a friend from YouTube with a insulation question. Looking at doing a foam roof blown in the walls. What type of insulation is used in the walls? He knows of Spider, Dow, etc. Is this an option with Tilson? What brand do we use?
We do foam homes all the time, so we have absolutely no issue. And then was the question that he was wanting to put foam in the walls and on the ceiling, or
no? I think what he's wanting, Justin, is he's wanting spray foam in the attic on the roof, and then he's wanting like a blown cellulose actually in the walls, which is, I mean, we've done it before, but we really prefer to do, I think, foam the whole thing if you're going to foam it, right?
I would foam the whole thing, and I like seeing one avenue or the other. If we're going to go with a traditional insulation or if we're going to go with foam, it really, when you're starting to run a manual J on your HVAC, so all of these things, and we're going to talk about this, they have to work together. So when I'm putting together a package for the exterior of it, it's be like trying to connect a Ford transmission to a Chevy motor. So we want to make sure they're all working together appropriately. And we feel that we have a really good foam program. And in addition to that, our traditional bats insulation and blown insulation, they really work well with the Linux equipment that we have and how we set that up.
Sorry, guys.
Ford and Chevrolet use the same transmissions now, which is pretty hilarious.
Oh, I didn't know that. You can tell I do not keep up with this.
We both use that new 10-speed automatic. Anyway, interesting. But your point is noted.
Makes sense. Let's see. Lenore is asking, her land is in the hill country. If the temperature is between 55 and 85, they love to open their windows. How will this affect the insulation in the home? Can they do foam insulation if the house is not sealed shut?
Sure. I mean, if they want to open their doors in those seasons, or shoulder seasons, if you will, where the temperature outside is bearable. In the hill country, you don't get the humidity. In the Gulf Coast, you're probably not opening your doors for very long, just because of the humidity that's going to be coming in.
The mosquitoes will carry you out the other side.
Yes, the hummingbird-sized mosquitoes that we get down here occasionally.
For sure.
Okay. And we have a question about foundation height. At what height on a foundation is it going to require stairs to be built?
I promise I didn't put this in here, Justin. This is a real person asking.
So what we established is a minimum is there has to be 30 inches. So we don't make the regulations that mandate those requirements. Typically speaking, your insurance company is going to object if it's over 30 inches. By code, it should be a substantial amount less. But at that point is really when we're going to start talking about steps and railings and how to incorporate those into the design of the home.
Okay. AR is asking, what can you tell me about getting a gas-powered generator installed during the build?
Oh, well, we can set that up. We're not going to do the connection on the gas generator, but we can certainly set that up. We do that all the time. And there's multiple different ways to achieve that. So ideally, what we would know is who you're going to contract to do the generator. And this is a great question right now, considering all the power outages that we have. But you're going to let us know who you're going to be using. They'll generally send over some information as to what kind of panel that's going to be able to incorporate that in, what we need to do to set them up. And our electricians generally will get that schematic. We might call them just to make certain of everything, but we can make that super simple. Because you can really start dividing out circuits in particular. You may not do a whole house where you're running your HVAC or your water heater, but you might only have lights. So there's a lot of different options that can get associated with that. But by talking to the generator company as to what you're looking for and then feeding us that information up on how to set the electrical up correctly, we can make that happen. And including the gas stub if you're going to go with gas.
Okay. Michael is asking if he supplies the temporary electrical pole or do we supply it?
We provide that.
All right. And Sophie is asking if it's an option for Tilson to epoxy the garage floor.
We don't have it. I mean, as far as I know, we don't have an option for that. We don't have a provider, really, preferably statewide. Obviously, we don't have someone that does that. We have had customers that do it. It looks nice, but again, that's typically something that's done after construction is done.
Okay.
Is that what you've seen, Justin?
Yes. Currently, we're not in that, but I will tell you, depending on what part of the state, it doesn't mean that we don't have a contractor that maybe that's a part of their business. We can certainly give you the number. So if you let us know, we'll certainly try and help you find somebody.
Okay. Let's see. Sherry says hello from Canton. I'm thinking of building her home with her VA loan. Do we know of any issues with her doing so?
Sherry, first of all, thanks for reaching out. And there's no issues with doing it with VA. There's a couple of misconceptions I would like to clear up. The first one is that the appraisal is going to be different. So the VA appraisal is a little bit more complicated. Not a little bit. It's a lot more complicated, a lot more in depth, and not as really reliable as a conventional or even FHA appraisal. So that's something to be aware of. A lot of times what we end up doing is getting you approved FHA or conventional up front, and then maybe switching it to VA at completion, at closing, making sure that obviously if you qualify for FHA or conventional, you're going to qualify for VA as long as you're a veteran. It's an entitlement. It's a little bit different deal. Truly an entitlement, and that to which you are entitled. So the other thing would be a lot of people think that it's great. It's zero money down, 100% finance. Well, pretty much all the homes we build end up being 100% financed because the customers have equity in the land. So you're going to be using your land as equity no matter what. You're going to be putting that land up as collateral, whether you're doing VA, FHA, or conventional. So right now, with the fees that are associated with VA, I would be shocked to know if you're going to save a whole lot of money. I mean, the rates are so low on a conventional loan that the VA rates are not much lower. And by the time you add the fees, the funding fees and things like that on top of what the VA requires, you don't end up saving any money. So evaluate all your options, because while the VA is a loan that you are entitled to as a veteran, it's not necessarily the best deal financially for you, given how low rates are right now.
Okay, that makes sense, I think. Let's see. Imelda is asking, can we add square footage to the master bedroom and bathroom on the Tampico to add a second vanity and separate shower and tub? If so, about how much do we think that would cost in Medina County?
Great news. I have already looked it up. It is a custom option. You can see it on the website, and it's about $12,000, about $11,600. It adds a significant amount of square footage, and it adds a big tub, a separate shower, another vanity, and yeah, it's about $11,600 to $12,000, depending on where you're building.
Okay, perfect.
I think actually all it doesn't add is the second vanity, so we'd have to add that separately. But everything else would be in there.
Okay. Jennifer's sharing her home burned in December. She needs to rebuild, but does not want to rebuild where that house was. Will we be able to help her decide where to put the new home? They've got 10 acres.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
That's not easy. But yes, we could certainly come out there and assist with finding the best next location for a home.
Absolutely. Stephen is asking if we would build a basement or just build on slab.
We're not going to do basements. It's here is depending on how close you are to the coast. We can really get into some water table issues. It's common construction up north, but we have not gotten into basement construction.
Yeah.
We have to elevate to get out of the water, so we don't want to dig any pits to encourage water to set in.
Absolutely.
So that's that, even in the hill country where maybe you don't have the water table, then you have rock. And by the time you go excavating into that rock, the cost is going to be just tremendous. So
add another bedroom.
Yeah. Go up in Texas.
And we have a question, assuming that we put in piers to stabilize the slab.
Well, here's a great one to answer, Justin. Do piers fix everything on foundation problems?
No. It used to be the line of logic that everything needed specifically bell-bottom piers. And what engineers have started to recognize is you really start going down into a subset of soil that has never had moisture associated with it. So we drill a hole, we put concrete, well, around the edges of that concrete, that void that will come up between the concrete and the sidewalls going down, all of a sudden you start to inject moisture down in an area that's not used to getting moisture. Well, it expands. That's what soil wants to do, is it wants to expand. So it's not always great to have piers associated with it. Sometimes it is the solution, but it doesn't mean every time. So that's why it's so important that when we get out there and we do the geological research to make sure that we're designing or engineering specific to that piece of property.
All right. Dee Dee is asking, what building code year do we follow?
It's dependent. So yeah, and across the state, I know that sounds a little wild, but each municipality will have a different requirement. So we have to follow whatever that county or that municipality is set up. Sometimes subdivisions will have some mandates in there too. But so it varies across. I will tell you, it's always the most recent update that we've seen for that county that we are. So we are going to be code compliant no matter where we are throughout the state.
Okay. Yeah, that was something that I didn't quite realize before I started working with Tilson, is that like the way building code works is it's sort of adopted nationally, and then each locality decides which pieces of it they're going to accept. So that's why it's kind of that we're using what the most recent for your area, but it might be a different year than we're currently in. It's
and the building code will be different from the electric code, which will be different from
the energy code. Yeah.
So there's different codes. There's not just a building code.
So we do a lot of research on that end. We have it pretty well mapped out at this point, but codes are ever changing. I mean, we know that they're always going to be changing. Harvey influenced how the city of Houston reacted to that, and they built in some new codes because of Harvey. We saw quite a few electrical changes this year where they're incorporating more GFIs into the home. So there's always some kind of code change, and then some cities will want to adopt the latest code very early because they're participants in it. In other words, they're like, well, we don't want to adopt that code just yet. So I hate to give you a vague answer, but I want to be honest with you that we will be current on whatever the requirement for that county is. And a lot of times it's not uncommon that we'll exceed that just by our sheer standards that we built to.
Yep. Wonderful. Haley is saying we plan to build on our land in a year or two as we are actively saving money. How far in advance do you recommend us coming in to discuss and plan?
Well, we're 12 to 14 months out from when you decide to give us a deposit till the time the house is completely finished and we hand you the keys. So, I mean, you really can't get in too soon to start at least discussing the plan. There's really not too soon.
Well, and that's the great thing about our showing up today. I mean, you're going to know pretty much already what you want. you're going to be a semi-pro by the time we're done with all of these things that you're attending. So I appreciate you showing up early in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Stephanie is asking, have we extended build paths for pool construction that will be done during home construction later in the project? So do we connect the pools to the foundation itself?
Not typically. It's and Justin may have got muted there for a second, but I know that a lot of times what will happen if you do that, you end up spending a lot more money on a pad than you probably need to. A lot of times if pools are going to be at a different elevation, let's say, than the back of the house, ideally lower, then what you would see is they kind of work that into the landscaping plan. So you kind of step down toward, instead of spending a bunch of money on a compacted fill pad big enough for a pool. I don't know, Justin, what do you think about that?
I don't believe we've done that in the past. And I also think that probably the pool contractor is probably following up with some possible engineering or some other requirements. So it might be interesting if you've already contacted the pool contractor and he's given you some provisions, I guess, to follow on that. I would love to see them. So it's not to say we can't or we won't. It's just not something that I've reviewed at this point.
Okay. Makes sense. Keith is saying he's looking to build in Saddle Creek Forest in Waller County. Which sales office should he work with? So Keith,
whichever one, go ahead.
Whichever one's most convenient for you. So the thing to keep in mind, really it's going to depend upon where you live right now, because any of our design centers can build anywhere in the state. So it's whichever design center is going to be the most convenient for you to go and review plans, do your color selections, and have all of your upfront meetings. So whoever you like.
Yeah, and who ends up building it, for Justin, will be based on their kind of workload at the time, how many jobs they're carrying, where those jobs are. So, you could buy the house out of the Bernie office and build in Saddle Creek. It's going to be built out of the location that's near, probably either Katy or Spring, depending on the workload at the time. And I know he had another question later. I'll go ahead and tackle it. And that was, have we built houses in Saddle Creek Forest? What are the address on what streets? And yes, we've built homes in Saddle Creek. Justin's built some. Other builders have built some. We can't give you the street names because we want to keep their. We have privacy agreements in our documentation. So, but the reality is, yes, we have built numerous.
And that's a cool subdivision too.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, let me scroll back up to where we were.
Sorry, I jumped the gun, Dawn. I do that sometimes.
I know. Mark is asking if we do metal roofing or is it only shingle?
We can do metal roofing. We're working currently to land a statewide deal to where we can do it turnkey. It was one of the components that instead of having multiple guys going around, one of the things that's important to me is that when I'm putting something in front of a customer, I want to know that I'm going to be able to duplicate it, which is there's specifications, and each one of them kind of has their own little spin on the metal roofing world. But yes, we can certainly, if you want a metal roof, let us know what you're looking for. So you can start in seam width, you can start getting into the gauge of the metal, colors, all those fun things. But if you have some ideas, we can certainly take those and start getting you some pricing for them.
Yeah.
Great. Bishop Clyde is asking, he says he's been waiting on one window for almost 2 months. Do you have any idea what's going on with our window supplier? What's taking so long? And is that a delay across the board?
Bishop, I'm glad you asked. Justin, please let him and the other know what is going on.
No, I tell you, I'm actually sitting in on a meeting on Friday with our window supplier. I think everybody through COVID, and I hate blaming COVID and I hate talking about it, but it's just our reality at this point. They were hit. They had to do the whole thing, the shutdown, do all the cleaning and cleansing of the warehouse twice, and they're backed up. In speaking to people in the industry, it seems to be an industry-wide problem. So I think they're having some problems, some transitions in getting some parts and pieces from other places that used to just be really easy to obtain. But it's systemic through the industry at this point from everything we're gauging. So we're working on it. I'm so sorry that window's taken so long. And I'm hopeful that Friday I get a little bit more information on when we're going to see some relief, because we certainly don't want our process being slowed down, because we don't want that for you. it is a challenge.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then Keith is asking, are 8-foot doors an upgrade? And also, how do we price a screen porch if he needs 2 walls framed and screened?
Depends on the plan, Keith. I mean, sometimes 8-foot doors are included. Sometimes it really is plan specific. So, and then when it's not, then that is a different question. Sorry. So screen porch it's priced by the lineal foot. So, just depend on how big of a porch that you need, and your design consultant can price that out for you.
Okay. And I'm going to see, let's go back into the presentation just so we can try to finish up, and then we will circle back to questions.
All right. So the thing where we're at now is we're starting to really get into the nuts and bolts of construction and building the home. So we've done all the preliminary stuff to get to this point. 2 critical things for any build, and something we hold near and dear, is our structure. And that would be the foundation and frame. And so it's not uncommon that we get this question: how do I know my slab is constructed correctly? Well, that same engineer that designed that foundation, we bring him back in within a few days of us actually placing concrete. And in this top right photo, you'll see the inspector out there. He is an MLAW inspector employee, and he's going through to make sure that everything was executed on the foundation engineering. So he's going to look at those beam widths. He's going to look at the beam depths. He's going to look at the cables. He's going to inspect to make sure that there's no obstructions or any kind of plumbing pipe that was in the way of those tendons that we have bringing in, so that when we get to the point of the foundation being cables being tensioned, everything's going to work out for us. So you'll see that. He'll also look for the nominal thickness of that foundation while he's there to make sure it's correct. Now, this is in addition to my builder who's already done this, and each one of my guys out there across the state, as we're starting to build this foundation, they have several measures in place that they must go through to make sure that everything's correct. The other thing is, when we come down and the slab is actually poured, and this kind of bounces around a little bit in the presentation, but we'll cover it the best I can here. But when we get to the point of the bottom right picture, that's what's actually tensioning that cable. And the gentleman that's on the right hand side, he actually works for MLAW2. So they're not out there just before we pour concrete. They're also out there as we're tensioning the slab to make sure that those cables are being tensioned appropriately to approximately 30,000 PSI each. So we put a lot of emphasis around the design, placement, and how we're making sure that slab's going to perform for the rest of the time by inviting them there. The actual construction of the foundation is, here we go. There we go. So it all begins, my mouse is going crazy. It's finicky. So
that's COVID.
It's cold, or it's just cold.
It's not COVID. It's cold. So the actual foundation begins here. So in this particular lot, you can see we built a pad up. So we brought in dirt before we ever set forms, so that we could elevate this, possibly to be level or possibly get it out of a floodway. But in this particular case, they brought in brand new material, put it on top of the existing soil, virgin soils, and then we came in and we set the form boards. Now you're going to notice that in these pictures here, they kind of stagger up and down, and some of these drops here are going to be for porches. You can obviously see all the stakes that are going around the sides that are going to support those, because there's quite a bit of pressure coming across those form boards whenever we're actually placing the concrete. So at this point, we're going to come in. My contractor's done what he's needed to. He's left a void, and you can't see it in the picture here, but he's left a void on the right-hand side because we're going to continue to bring dirt inside of the forms. And that's what's going to form the pads as we dig them out. But at this phase, each builder is going to go around. He measures each one of these little offsets, the overall dimensions. He also checks it for square. So there's a lot of activity just in this very first start. I mean, there's a lot of activity that has to go on to make sure that this is done properly. The other thing you're going to notice is the boards that we have here, they kind of extend out past. And the reason for that is we're going to use these boards. We don't take these boards off and use them into the framing. We go ahead and designate this lumber as just for setting forms and forms only. So we recycle it. Typically, we'll get about 10 to 15 homes out of these form boards. So once that's done, we're going to come in and we put dirt and plumbing in here. So we're going to add soil in here, and it all looks relatively flat. But then also you'll see all of your plumbing, what we call your plumbing grounds, that are going to go into the foundation. So that's done. And then we're going to start digging and trenching to get all of this waffle appearance, and they'll call this a waffle slab occasionally. But all of these beams are cut. And what those beams are doing is they're making sure that those load points are coming down specifically where the beams are. So a lot of times these things will channel underneath walls. Sometimes they're going to be strategically placed in offset to make sure that we're managing the load from the actual lumber, masonry, sheetrock, and all of those things independently. And we also put, in this particular case, you'll see here our water stub out. But these guys are going to make sure that everything is done correctly. And it's at this point, once we get here, that their inspector is going to come out and he's going to count all of these cable, measure all of these beams, the beam width, beam depth, make sure the offsets are done correctly so that we don't have any problem.
Okay.
Now this, of any job that I've ever built, and the one challenge we have, and I think any builder would have to agree to this, the biggest coordination goes on when we're actually going to pour concrete. So this involves the concrete material, it involves a concrete pump a lot of times, like we're using here, requires my builder to be there. And we also need, the biggest factor to cooperate is Mother Nature. Mm-hmm. So it's not just getting a few companies together, but the weather leading up to the point of pouring concrete, and then the day of really sets the stage for having a successful pour. I would not be pouring concrete today. It's too cold. It's too wet. And I certainly don't want an 80,000 pound truck running up and down the roads, potentially colliding with somebody. But so we need all of those factors to come together in order to successfully pour this concrete. And they're going to be on this thing. We generally try and start early as we possibly can. Sometimes we're restricted. We can't start till 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. But these guys could potentially be on this slab up to 12 hours, depending on the weather, depending on the size of the slab. There's just a lot of conditions that are associated with that. But you can see these guys working awfully hard here, especially the guy holding the pump. He's trying to direct that concrete. I think I would have got the pump truck driver. I'd have told him just move it over a little bit. My shoulder's worn out, but he's working hard to get this thing. So what you're seeing him do here too, it's pretty exciting. So all this material's going in there. And it's like baking a cake on a much larger scale. You're throwing all that material into the pan, and these guys have to try and level it out the best they can with all kinds of obstacles in the way. Plumbing pipes, form boards, each other, additional concrete coming in. So they're working extremely hard. We want to stay out of their way, but we're also monitoring them there. So my builder will be on the job site, making sure that if they need anything, we're there to expedite getting it to them as quick as we possibly can.
Very nice.
Wonderful.
Now, guys, I know we have a lot of questions stacking up. We are going to get to them. We want to get through the presentation. Justin's very popular. A lot of people have a lot of questions for you, Justin. So, it's good. We've got questions about your upbringing. There's all kinds of weird things in here.
Oh, really? Well,
no, not at all.
It's questionable. I'm in construction.
See Brad Smelly saying howdy. Hello, Brad.
Hey, there's Brad. Oh, Brad should get on here and tell me all about this.
Seriously, Brad, dial in and tell us about slab finishing, man.
Yeah. So this is when, or previously you were seeing the trucks unload the material and getting the concrete placed into the forms. Here you're starting to see this concrete set up. So it starts to generate some heat, and it's starting to set up. The moisture, the water is starting to extract from it. And so we'll start to put these screeds on there so that this is another way of getting on the concrete without physically standing on it. After they're done with this, the picture on the right, they're going to let it set up for a little while. And you're actually going to see these bleed waters come to the top of the surface. And that's the acids and the moisture that's coming up to the surface. But that concrete is then beginning to cure. Now, it's not going to cure completely for a good 28 days. And in this weather, it might take a day or two longer. But it's not going to cure to its max potential for a good 28 days. But after a few hours, then you'll notice on the left, we're able to stand on it. And so we'll use some hand trowels and machine trowels to come out there to continue trying to smooth out that concrete to make it as flat as possible. Once we get past that, the builder breathes a sigh of relief. At this point, I finally got my slab down, and it's not going to nothing bad can happen to me here. So we're excited about the opportunity to get into framing. So you're going to see a lot of material deliveries, and man, this is between the concrete and the framing. This is where a lot of money gets spent and invested into the home. So we call McCoy's up and we start telling them, hey, we need all this fun stuff to get delivered to the job site. Now, this is relatively fresh delivery, and my guys are starting to work on the framing on this particular job. And you can see in the background, they've got it constructed. But when it's initially delivered, they're going to cover it with plastic. We're going to try and keep it out of the elements as best we can. And we try and keep it bundled. So you won't see us unbundling it unless we're absolutely needing it, or if it's time for that component to go in there, to try and keep that material as straight as possible and true as possible. So the next big thing, and this is really, of all the customers I've ever built for, and this is why I enjoyed framing so much, it seems like this is when the most progress happens, because you really get the visual, the skeleton, if you will, of what this is going to look like. A lot of times it's not uncommon when people look at a foundation only, they're like, it doesn't look as big as I thought it was going to be. But once you start putting framing in the air, and when you start to see the walls, the joists, and the rafters, it really starts to take shape. So the time frame for this, because that's generally the other question, how long does everything take? It varies. Again, it's going to depend on the size of the house, where it's located, sometimes the size of the crew that we have. Weather is another variable that we're still working through at this point in construction. But there's a lot of effort and energy here to start putting marks on the slab. You'll see that when my guys are out to the job sites, they're going to leave you little notes. They're not specific to you, but you can kind of start to understand that when they're on the job site. They'll label what door swings are going to be on the interior doors. We're going to mark out your cabinets. We're going to start to include where the dryer vent's going to go, where the vent for the hood's going to go. Just miscellaneous things, typically done in black, but you'll start getting some indicators that, oh, he was here. And that's our way of communicating when we're not on the job site, because we're not going to be there every minute that the framer's there or every minute that the plumber's there. So we want to provide them direction. So you'll see some of those things going through the house as you're walking around and notating that the builder was there, providing that direction that they need for the subsequent parts of construction. Getting a new mouse tomorrow. It's coming. So then after the framing, we're going to get into the drying in stage of the home. And this is the point of dry in here at the bottom right. And you'll see we love our Tyvek products. We wrap the house in those. And then on the top side, we're using Owens Corning. And so at this point, the amount of weather that's going to impact the house should be minimal. It's not to say that in some of the valleys that we may not get some rain or something that comes through that paper, because it's not fastened down like a shingle or a metal roof. But at this point, we are dried in. This really allows us pretty much anytime we need access to the home, we should be able to perform something on the interior. So next we're going to start doing a bunch of things that necessarily aren't the sexiest things to look at. So electrical lines and plumbing lines and HVAC lines really aren't fun to look at. It'll be fun to look at those things later on down in the process. But here's the critical part. So if we've done our job correctly, everything's going to line up. So you can see in this picture here, this particular builder, he did label out some of the cabinets that are on the bottom. They're on the opposite side of the wall from the direction we're looking at it. His tub is slid perfectly in space, in the place, it's square. Everything's lined up. So the plumber was able to come in and execute right where the drain was supposed to be, stem off of that, put his vent pipe up in the center of that cavity. So we're trying to avoid that when we're hanging cabinets or whatever it's going to come into the home on this location. And the electrician was able to follow around and navigate, putting in all of his electrical. So not necessarily the prettiest things to look at, but it's from a functionality standpoint, certainly everything has to align to make it look right later. Then we get into the HVAC. So right now, I imagine everybody would appreciate heat. So we're going to have our best to keep people warm. So there's some things we designate for the HVAC company. So while we were putting all this planning together and harvesting all this information from stakeout and sales, something our drafting department's doing is they're starting to figure out inside the house, how are we going to make all these things to make it functional and make it feel right? How are we going to fit those into the home? And sometimes we have to do certain things, allocate certain amount of spaces. For instance, in this HVAC here, I have to have 30 inches that I'm able to move around up there. Yeah. So when you go to change your filters or the service tech comes in at a later date, they have to be able to navigate around that equipment to do what they need to do. So we start putting those ideas together in the early infant stages. And if we run into an obstacle, we might come back to you and say, hey, we need to move something around just a little bit to make all this big equipment work. On the electrical rough, you can see here, one of the things that we would have labeled is where this panel is going to go to make sure that it coincides with all the, if there's gas coming in, make sure the panel's far enough away from the gas stub out, or if there's an HVAC equipment that's coming in over there, making sure it's accessible. This guy did a great job of separating all his electrical lines. It's the little things that go unappreciated a lot of times by contractors, but they're not just wadded up into one big ball coming down the top plate. It's separated out because these do conduct heat. So we want to give them some relief so those wires don't burn up, don't turn down the road. And you can see he's got all of his wires situated here to pull those home runs back in to the panel. The next step is we're going to insulate. Now, before we insulate, you're going to notice in construction that we pause. We've been going through on a daily basis, every other day, as much as we can, going through, making little notes that you're going to see to provide direction. But we do get to a point before we cover up with sheetrock, just like we did with the foundation. We came to a stop, got everybody to inspect it and sign off saying, hey, we feel good about it. We're going to have another group of inspectors come in. It's a different company at this point, but they're going to make sure, because of the code compliance question earlier, they come through to make sure that we've done everything appropriately. Right. A second set of eyes is just a great thing to have on a job site. So we want that peace of mind, and you want that peace of mind, and we have no problem providing you those inspection reports as well to let you know, hey, this is what we found. We are human. We want to catch everything we possibly can, and I have nothing to hide. I want you to know exactly what we're doing to make sure your home is built correctly. So in here, you see that we've got the insulation in. So we've done that punch out. We've got the inspection. The inspector has said, yes, you can insulate. We get to this point, we insulate, no matter what type of insulation it is. We then bring in the inspector again, because insulation is just equally as important as everything else. So they're going to start making sure the insulation is the right size, it's cut correctly, or it's filled to the proper depth if it's a foam insulation. And we're going to make sure that everything is appropriate and sealed off to the best of our ability so that we're not having an influx of outside air coming into the home once we're finished with it. So once we get through this part, the builder breathes again. He's excited. He's like, all right, I got all my inspections passed. It's time to move on to the next fun stuff. Oh, and here we get some foam insulation. Sorry, I missed a slide here, Eric. You slid one in on me.
We do both, brother. We do both.
We do. So this, again, would have been inspected prior to this the insulation being installed. They still come back, even if it's spray or conventional insulation, they're still going to come in and they're going to inspect this to make sure everything's correct. Then we get into the actual sheetrock hang. This is really when the house is, you really start to see the definition of the rooms, and it's truly exciting. So the first picture that you see in the top left is where we're just simply hanging the sheetrock. So we're going to come in, they're going to do the ceilings, then they're going to do the walls, and in that they're going to come back and they're going to screw all of this in. They might initially tack it up with some nails, but we increased our nail pattern this year on our screw pattern, on our sheetrock this year as well. Then the next thing we do is the same company will generally bring in a tape and float crew. So you'll see them coming in, and this is where the mud starts to fly. It's a little bit of the grungy part to get to the pretty. So we're having to go through this. You're going to see sheetrock mud. You're going to see sheetrock dust. It's going to be it's just kind of a messy stage, and we kind of expect it to be. We do not sweep up the dust, and this is done strategically because it makes it that much easier to actually clean the dried sheetrock mud off of the concrete. So when we put our flooring down, it's just easier to extract. So you'll see us get a little dirty there. We apologize in advance, but there is a method to the madness here. So once we get through this, we'll tape and float, we'll texture, and then we're moving into the more fun things.
Yeah.
New mouse. I swear, IT, give me a new mouse. So when we start to do the interior finishes, and this is really the exciting part. When we do our jobs correctly, all of these things slide into place. We might have to make a little tweak, a minor adjustment here or there. There's still a lot of thought that goes in to make the tile work for this shower, what we can do, where it needs to stop, all these things that will be incorporated. If you have a deco or something going in, we're going to stop that short. So there's still a lot of thinking that's going on here to make sure that everything works out. But everything should pretty much slide into place. So we really get excited about when we start talking about our interior finishes. The cabinets we have now are just really top notch. I'm really excited about our Kentmore cabinet program we've rolled out. So we kind of get to a point in construction. We've put your cabinets in, we've trimmed your doors, we've painted, we put the tile in, all the process is going on. And then it's like, all we need to do is like a few things and we'd be done. There's still a lot of mechanical and inspection things that we will go through at this point. So there's a tedious list that's generated on each job that builders will go through in preparation for not only the inspector, but also to introduce the home to you. So we really want to drive our team members, our contractors, to make sure that we're delivering what we expect, so that you have the benefit of it. And so you won't see anything. A lot of times, unfortunately, too, as we move around through a house, we're going to get dents and dings and scratches. We do our best. We lecture to this ad nauseum about being more careful, but we're ordering those additional parts and pieces in. The windows that we talked about, another thing that we're a little challenged with at times might be light fixtures or appliances. So we might have some of those things that are being introduced here that are causing some delays. But at this point, we're still working. It's just not physically stuff that you're seeing on the job site.
Absolutely.
We'll get all the interiors done. Simultaneously, the home's going to take two different categories. You have your interior and your exterior. And so while we've been doing on the interior, on the outside, the masons have been showing up, or the painters, the roofers, other contractors are coming to present you with what you see in the picture here, which is a finished home. So there is pretty much a process to everything. There are some deviations that we can call in the schedule. For instance, on this house, we're going to go in with the stucco first, and then we came back in with the stone. There is a few times that we've had to come in with stone first, just the way that the stucco was coordinated in the project, and we had to bring the stucco contractor in afterwards. But pretty much you'll just see it's pretty linear process throughout. They just have two different aspects, the interior and the exterior. Final inspection. So this is the point we've gotten to that we've been angling for from the very beginning, is to make sure that when we get to the very end, it looks appropriate and it's functioning correctly. So we're going to have those inspections done pretty much around the same time as when we were doing an introductory walk with you. And that way everybody's coming together because everybody's anxious to close, and nobody ever wants to postpone closing. So we're anxious. So we're incorporating those two things. So it's not uncommon to see an inspector floating around potentially during a walkthrough or the day after. But we're going to prep everything, make sure everything's working correctly. The inspector is going to go through and do the same. He's going to check your outlets. He's going to check your hot and colds on your water. He's going to go into the attic to make sure nothing has been changed or altered from the time he was there on his first visit. He's going to check the functionality and make sure that everything on the outside is still incorporated correctly as far as the masonry, because that was done after that first inspection. So a lot of things, tedious things, are reviewed to make sure that everything's complete and correct. So we get to the point where the home is finished, and we want to meet with you. There's a lot of great information from a maintenance standpoint or functional standpoint of the home that we want to go over with you. Sometimes it's the silliest things, like understanding how to refill a soap dispenser doesn't require you getting all the way underneath the cabinet to undo the little plastic thing. You can just lift it off.
Pro tip, yeah.
A great customer, Miss Weathers, said I need to tell her that sooner. So there's a lot of things that we pick up on, but we want to go over that, the functionality of the house, but also start to talk to you about maintenance. Maintenance is a huge part of the home, just like a vehicle getting its oil changed. We're going to talk to you about changing your air filters. We're going to talk to you about what you can and can't do with vegetation, maybe put some potential, some sidewalks that you're going to incorporate into the home. If you're adding that additional structure, we can talk about that and make sure that there's no negative impact on the structure of that home. But also we want to go through, again, another set of eyes going through the home. Who knows what you might pick up on that we may have not seen, or maybe it's special lighting. Sometimes it's not uncommon that if you're living on the job site and you might have seen something that we just didn't catch while we were there at a certain time of day. So at that point we meet, we'll have already started talking about a closing date. And we commit at that point that we're going to have the list of items, whatever that might be, resolved from our inspector, our list and your list resolved. And we're going to set a date to move in. Once you take ownership of the house, we don't run and hide. We have what will be 13 locations across the state, and they're pretty permanent. So we invite you. If there's a question that you have, we have not only the builder that built your home is a great resource. We also want to introduce you to our customer service team, and they're there to answer or assist you with any questions. If there should be a problem, we want to make sure that we resolve it quickly and we coordinate those items. We will ask you to register some of your appliances because there is extended warranties along with them that we simply can't register for you. They have to be directed under your name. For example, appliances and HVAC equipment. But we're there as a resource for you through the life of that home. And then you get to close and the moving companies come, and then you get to talk to the blinds and all the other fun stuff associated with it. So
awesome.
So in here, it's talking about 6 to 9 months. If we unfreeze soon, we'll be back down to 6, but I think 6 is going to be a lofty goal as we start to navigate over the next couple of months if we're starting construction today. So I'm ready for questions. I've been watching. It's kind of hard because my double monitor, I keep seeing things over here on my left.
Don't worry. Dawn's been keeping close tabs. Get you a swig of the Lipton Brisk iced tea. Get ready. There you go. Straight Tilson water.
Yeah.
I've been drinking a lot of water at the house. That's all we have is bottled water. So I ran to the gas station, got some Cheetos and some beef jerky and Lipton Brisk iced tea. Super exciting.
Awesome.
All right. We have questions. Thank you, Justin, for doing that.
We have a lot of questions. Yes.
This is going to be good.
Yes. And guys, if I think we've already answered your question, I may skip you. So if I skip you, please put your question back in if it hasn't been answered yet. We are going to try to answer everybody's questions. So Shannon is asking us to explain how the appraisal will work if she paid cash for her land.
Oh, I can explain that, Shannon. It won't. We don't do one. So you're good. Oh, if you pay
cash for the land,
not cash for the home. Oh, very good. All right. So if you pay cash for the home, there's no appraisal necessary. If you pay cash for the land, then it's still going to be appraised as if it were going to be built today and sold. It'll gather comp. So we're going to give the plans, a map, whatever kind of specifications we have to the bank, whoever your lender is, to the mortgage company. They are going to order the appraisal. We don't actually order it. The mortgage company orders it. And then that appraiser is going to gather comps as if that home were built today, exactly what it would sell for. So based on other closings, not what's for sale, but what is actually closed in your area. The good news is because we're out in rural areas, mostly they can go a little further out to get those comps. But that's how the appraisal works. So there's typically that's part of the application to the mortgage company is it pays for that appraisal. And that appraisal, again, is done up front. You get a copy of that. We get a copy of that. The mortgage company gets a copy of it. And so that you know before we ever drive a nail exactly what your equity position is. Great question, Shannon. Thanks.
Exactly. And then let's see. I think we already answered about the generator. We have a question, is site clearance cost extra, and can we give an estimate on that?
Depends on where. As in some of our locations, some of our municipalities, the pricing that we have, if you got it at one of the design centers like Texas Grand Ranch or a place like that, the clearing is actually included. But if you're just getting the price off of our website, the kind of the starting at pricing, then no, that pricing is not going to be included. And well, that can vary a lot, huh, Justin? It
really can. So I mean, depending on what's there, and then additionally, how much geography you want to clear. So it can vary. But I will tell you this: we have no problem in getting some folks in touch with you. We collect a lot of information during that site evaluation, and we extend that on to contractors. So we can certainly get you a bid and make sure that you're able to get what you want.
Okay, makes sense. Barbara is asking, is running the electricity from the pole to the house included in the price of the home, and is that underground?
It can be. If you're to choose to have the service underground, we can certainly do that. We allocate 50 feet so that from the actual pole to the actual house. And this is, I can understand where it'd be confusing. Why didn't it just include it? But in some cases, because somebody might be bringing in different things to the property, different improvements, so we may decide to go around it. So it's not always just a straight shot that is really going to achieve what the customer is wanting. We start out with 50 foot. It generally accommodates quite a few of the projects, and very rarely does we not see it exceeded by a little bit, but it's certainly generally enough to get you started with.
Absolutely. Bishop Clyde is asking, he's paying for a contractor to lay his driveway. When should he allow them to come in and begin during construction? So I guess we're talking about the final driveway. When do we want that poured?
Okay. You want to do a flat work, Justin?
We would ideally have the outside pretty much complete. So that way, what I don't want is my guys driving on the pristine, brand new driveway. Mm-hmm. So if we can get the outside pretty close to complete, septic's in, electrical's connected, propane or gas is ran, like we want to get all of those things out of the way so that way you have good access to get in there. The smaller trucks and lighter vehicles on a driveway after about 5 to 7 days, depending on weather, is okay. But the outside needs to be complete for the most part.
Okay.
And I would tell you too, and it's so generic, our builder should really be guiding you and coordinating with you when those things are coming in so that you have visibility on when to schedule. And that's important. That communication aspect is really important there. So please contact your builder to make sure that I'm not setting you up or him up for failure.
Right.
Absolutely.
Try to get your builder before Justin does.
Martina's asking, back when we were talking about the current codes being used, are those determined at the time of the contract? Do we change it if a new code comes out before construction is complete?
So we will be forced to, so your contract, it is potential there that your contract might have a code in it that we end up, depending on when it starts, we may have had to go adopt the new code specific to your house. And this happens to us. So because the code becomes effective when they say, they don't care what my contract says, they're going to go by a date, a calendar date. So I can promise you it will not be less than. In the code book, they don't extract things from the code book. It's generally always an add. And I hate that might come across vague, but that's the reality, is that sometimes we will update to the more recent code because of requirements.
Okay.
And that is what, that's a great question, Martina, because that is what changes prices sometimes. If a house starts to drag on and hasn't started construction yet and the code changes quite drastically, we'll sometimes, if it's been 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 months since we did a contract and the customer's not ready to start yet still for whatever reason, it could be a title issue, could be a loan issue, could be site access issue. We will have to go back and say, hey, we have to build it to this new code. Therefore, the price is going to cost different now. So great question, Martina. Thanks for asking.
Okay. AR is asking, is it possible to get to the stakeout phase and find out that the house can't be built as approved? And do we have any provisions in place to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, this kind of dovetails into another question old AR has, because I think he
said he got to his stakeout last Wednesday and was told that the home would not fit according to the plans.
It happens. Sometimes it has to do with building line. I don't know the exact situation, AR, so I don't want to project, but a lot of times it'll be like building lines, setback lines, easements, access, utilities, something like that will make it where maybe when we sat down in the design center with the design consultant, sales consultant designing the house out, and then it got out there to Justin's team, the site evaluator. It was like, hey, this utility easement here, this building line here, we won't be able to get a driveway in, or we just flat out won't fit, just because you have a 100-foot wide lot. Well, if you've got 25-foot side building lines, now you have 50 feet to work with. So I don't know the exact situation, but typically what we'll do is we can go back and redesign the house. We can choose a different house. We can reverse the plan. There's typically stuff that we do to overcome that. I haven't seen it very often where we just flat out couldn't overcome it. It's pretty rare.
Okay. All right. Rebecca's asking if we install outdoor hose faucets that are frost resistant, or can they be set on a single manifold shutoff to help in a hard freeze?
They said a great word there, Justin, and it says resistant.
So there are faucets out there, and there's some limitations to them. To answer your question, that's not what we typically put in. We have gotten customer requests for freeze resistant or freeze proof hose bibs. They actually have a mechanism that drives the shutoff further into the wall, and you typically have to do it on an interior T-wall. I put a few in, and I had one customer said he wished he would put them in because then the leak gets further into the wall cavity. But each situation is a little bit different. To set them up on the manifold, we actually got away from the manifold system. The industry just moved away from it. It had some great selling points to it, but they decided this just wasn't because the components of that were plastic as well. So there was, instead of them being out of the PEX material that expands and contracts, the shutoffs were hard plastic. So we moved away from the manifold system.
Okay. See, Stephen is asking if spalling concrete is noticed during the framing process. Do we do anything to correct the issue, or do we just lay new floors over it? So for those of us that don't know, what is spalling concrete?
It's kind of flaking, like
flaking.
Yeah, that's the best way I can describe. Scaling is another way to describe it. Justin, I don't know if you're describing another way, but it's not structural, is what it typically means.
No, it's not structural. So ideally, we would have our builders taking a look at that. And if it's flaking, we probably want to get a little bit more involved on if that's happening. If we're seeing cracks through the slab, typically when they do the post-tension cable, when they stress those cables, you'll still see them, especially if the concrete gets wet. It's real obvious they hold moisture, and then it's just the darker area that's going to channel that same vein. But in those cases, we will come back over. We have, with our tile company, we have a thin set and grout that we feel comfortable with that's going to give some expand and contract. We also deploy our tile contractors to put a crack suppressant over those cracks in the foundation.
Okay.
Yeah, and Stephen, basically, it's going to be very case by case, like Justin's saying. We're going to want to take a look at that, see what's going on. It also would kind of depend on what floors are going on it. I mean, with a wood floor or even a lot of the vinyl planks, there's going to be there's going to be floating involved already. Yes. Right, Justin? So where we actually bring in.
It's really just your solids, are mainly limited to tile. If you're doing stained concrete, it's going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah, if it's going to be carpet or something like that, they're probably not going to do a whole bunch to change it, because we're putting a pad down and a carpet on top of it, which you'll lose the effect of whatever's happening in the concrete anyway. So Great question, Stephen. Very specific.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Let's see. We have a YouTube friend who's looking to move back from Colorado. I'm curious how Tilson keeps the southern bugs and all of their friends out of the houses.
What do we do, Justin?
We build them as tight as we possibly can. So part of the energy inspection is to see how much air is lost through the home. And we actually do what we call a blower door test towards the end, and a duct blaster test. So those are the places that are susceptible to having outside influence. But to tell you that something can't creep inside of a threshold or a weed pole and make its way in, I don't think anybody would be willing to commit that to you. But the holes are minimized as much as humanly possible, so that we don't have easy points of access for ants and crickets or whatever else scorpions, whatever we might be seeing across the state.
And something else to keep in mind on that is just don't completely clear cut your property. I mean, that we talked about in one of the other videos where the bugs are going to go kind of the path of least resistance. So if there's like a whole bunch of trees or woods over here somewhere, or a house sitting on kind of sort of compacted fill with a concrete foundation and poisonous lumber they have to chew through, up 2 feet of what we spray bore care treatment on the plumbing penetration. So I mean, basically, if you make the better alternative over here, this pile of wood versus your house, you're going to be good. Subdivisions, production subdivisions, where they go in and just ace the place, that's where you typically see these kinds of issues, because the bugs literally have nowhere else to go but the homes. So the way we build them, it's less likely for that to happen. Not impossible, like Justin saying.
We have a question on YouTube about Tyvek, asking why we're using that. Have we started using the zip system? What's our opinion of Tyvek versus zip?
This is Tyvek. I'll let Justin speak to that, but we've done zip systems on house before. We were doing that back in 04, 06.
We
didn't have a great experience. So
there's nothing wrong with the zip. I mean, it's not a bad system. I think, if I'm guiding anybody, I want to make sure that I'm comfortable with the actual structure of the home and that our techniques are going to line up. So if I see guys that are moving from system to system, I wonder about the contractor at that point, because my guys are great guys, and once they get in a rhythm and a routine, I know those applications because there's a lot of tape associated with it, and the zip system has some nuances and some equipment. But I feel like our guys are very familiar with, and I've not had a problem with Tyvek. That's the other reason. Anytime I'm looking at it, it's like Hardy. There's other products out there, but man, I just haven't had a problem with Hardy. I hadn't had a problem with Tyvek. I love the fact I can pick up the phone and get in touch with any one of those companies, and they're going to be right there. If there's an application issue, they're going to give me some advice. They're going to give me direction. So I feel like we've got a great partner with Tyvek, Owens Corning, all those companies, to ensure that we're providing something that's going to be lasting. And if we ever have an issue, I also don't want to start using a ton of different materials and not knowing from job to job if there should be a problem encountered later on down the road as to which direction we need to go to resolve it. So I like my Tyvek for now.
Yeah, I don't know. The system's not new. Their marketing program is pretty new, but the zip system itself is not a new system.
No, it's not new. But I meant by new is just from one product to another.
Oh yeah, no. I was referring to the question. I would never question you, Justin.
Oh. Yeah, right. Sales not question construction. It doesn't happen.
The yin to your yang.
Lisa's asking if they can meet with the electrician to go over specific outlet placements. They want to hang their TVs throughout the house and want a TV on their patio.
Lisa, that's actually done during the sales process. So by the time you go to construction, you're not having to make those decisions, and in fact, we discourage you from moving stuff around once it's in the field. So we go through room by room of the plans on a floor plan, electrical plan, front, side, rear elevations, cabinet detail. All of that's done in the office where you're not out there at the job site where it's either 19 degrees or 91 degrees, trying to make those decisions on the fly. That's all done. And if you want them 60 inches above the floor, 72 inches above the floor, at the floor level, how you want that done is all done through the sales process. So those decisions are made. You don't have that stress of having to run around and drop what you're doing and run out to the job site and decide that. A lot of custom builders do make you do that. We don't make you do that. We decide that up front before the file ever goes to construction.
Yep. Bishop Clyde is asking, during construction, when do you order the second survey and appraisal? With the delay it took for the first ones, it's taken into consideration when we request the second, so it does not delay closing.
The first one is by far the most challenging. That first survey, again, it's something that maybe we should have discussed then, but you're trying to coordinate all those things. And surveyors right now, with all the great sales that everybody's seeing, surveyors are backed up. And then on top of that, we now have this weather pattern that's not going to assist us. But generally speaking, on the second, you have more time, more indicators as to when that should be done. So you have 3 to 4 weeks that you can start honing in and get really specific as that builder's building that schedule. So I feel like the survey and the appraisal is a little bit easier to target on the backside than it is on the front side.
To answer the question specifically, it's ordered once everything that's included in the loan is done.
Yeah.
So, like, for instance, if the driveway and the septic system and the propane tank are all going to be in the loan, they can't do that survey until all those things are done. If those things aren't necessarily being included in the loan, a lot of times the survey can be ordered earlier, basically when the house is done. For sure, the house will have to be on it, but typically it's the house and then anything else that's included in the loan amount.
Okay.
Great question. And and actually not even just sales that Jess was talking about, but refinances have really, there's been way more of those than there have new home sales. And every single refinance, all these companies you hear advertising refinance, every single one of those needs a survey. Every single one of those needs an appraisal.
Yep.
So you're competing with them too.
Yep. Audrey is asking about what areas are the different climates. So for the most part, climate zone 3 is going to be our more northern counties. Climate zone 2 is going to be the southern counties. And in the hill country, it's going to kind of vary county by county. Gets a little random in there. So if you shoot us a question, if you're looking for information about a specific county, we can tell you which climate zone that is in.
Justin has them all memorized in his head, I know.
No,
Okay, then we can just ask Justin.
I have a map. I can reference a map.
That'll work.
Vanessa is asking, is stained concrete stained during the pour or after it is poured, and how is it protected during the construction phase?
We stain our concrete after it's poured. They do make stains that can be incorporated into the concrete. We do not put those in. So what we will do in our stained concrete, we have you select something that's in that general color in the sales park as you're going through. Then the stain contractor will meet. He's going to do a few samples on the slab out there where cabinets are going, so that way they're covered up to get you to kind of pick, because you can even darken in it. The concrete itself, the stain will react a little bit differently. So he'll make a few samples up underneath the cabinet area, have you select it, then he'll stain the concrete at that point. We'll come back and we'll put an overlayment of some kind, whether that's paper or some people use a plastic, but we'll put something on top of that to protect it as best we can as we go through construction. Now, this is done somewhere prior to sheetrock. So we have a lot of activity that still has to go on. But generally, we're pretty successful as we go through that, get to the end. They'll come in there and polish it, clean up any little touch-ups that they need on the stain, and then they'll put the sheen on it that you see when you're finished.
Okay, great question. Barbara is asking what the cabinets are made of.
So the faces are the wood that you select. So if you select maple, that's going to be what that material is. The boxes themselves are going to be made out of an MDF material. So they're engineered wood. So all of our boxes, we do have an option. If you want to go to a plywood box, you can certainly do that as well. But we incorporate the regular box in there out of MDF.
All right. Jessica's giving you guys a hard time for having plastic bottles. Jessica, they don't have water at their houses. You can't wash their tumblers, but I do have my mug because I have water and power, and I've gone green. There's Eric's.
And we don't wash these. This is coffee.
Jessica, I'm sorry. I would, but I've been without power. I have no water because I live on a well, and so I'm limited on resources.
Usually we have our Yetis.
He smells badly.
I definitely have an odor.
They're not even on the same side of the city, and they're saying that.
Yeah, we're like 40 miles apart, and trust me.
It's not far enough.
Susan is asking, during stakeout, she went from 3 foot on one side to 9 foot on the garage side. Any suggestions on how to avoid a garage 9 feet up from grade?
during stakeout, we go from 3 foot on one side to 9 foot. That's a severe out of level on that piece of property.
Yeah, so or lands like this.
Yeah, so we've got a tremendous amount of slope. So there's a lot of variables here that I feel like we can look at.
It might be more specific that we can answer on the live. But
I think it's very lot specific. It's also plan specific as far as what options could be and which direction it's sloping in comparison to the orientation of the house.
Yeah, we've reversed them in cases like that. We've actually dropped the garage in some cases where the garage is actually down lower than the house and you step up into the house. I mean, there are some alternatives, Susan. So maybe we can get with your sales consultant and the site evaluator and find out specifically a little bit better. But without being able to see the actual grade shots, Justin's probably not going to be able to ascertain exactly what's going on.
That makes sense. Mark is asking if we opt for the Tilson loan option to get our house building started, how fast can we pay off that loan? Can we pay in lump sums or one large payment after selling our 2-family home here? And he's in Germany.
Well, so it's not financed through Tilson. We use a mortgage company, actual separate lender that we have no affiliation with whatsoever. There's no financial gain, no affiliated business agreement, nothing like that. They're just ones that deal with build on your lot all the time. So it's a much more pleasant experience. That's why we send our customers to them, because it's about the customer, not about us. But to answer your question, there's no penalty for early payoff with their loan programs. They are straight up FNMA, Fannie Mae guideline loans. So there's no penalty for early payoff. You can do just like that. It doesn't make any difference how you do that. Great question though, Mark.
Okay. Jen is asking if we prefer a lot that has been cleared or one that hasn't been cleared.
Go on, Justin.
Let me come take a look at it before you do anything. I really like the opportunity for us to come out and evaluate the site because it might save you from doing unnecessary work. And I hate for you to make any assumptions over what we're going to need. The underbrushing that we discussed earlier. So if you have the larger trees, leave those in. Let us come out there, take a look and see what we feel like needs to be done based on where you're wanting to place the house. But the little stuff that's down below the bigger trees, underbrush, get that cleared out, and then we can really see what we have. But
we do have to be able to actually get onto the property to tell you a whole lot. I mean, if it's just thicket, like he was showing you earlier in that picture, there's not a whole lot we can tell you. So definitely at least underbrush, but you don't have to go in and, if you got a 20, 30, 80-year-old oak tree that you're questionable about, don't touch it.
Please.
Particularly if you're in a city, don't touch it. Yeah. Let us come take a look at it first.
Yes, because in some areas you'll get in trouble if you clear without approval. So Kurt is asking if prior to final closing, does Tilson deal with the cleaning of the home's interior or does the buyer?
Tilson will take care of the cleaning of the home. We will incorporate it into our process. We have a couple cleans there at the end. So one, just before we start putting in carpet and some other finishing touches, and then we'll have another clean before we meet.
Okay. Don is asking if we're putting the home on regular dirt, how much per foot for electrical and water?
I double checked this real quick. You're looking, depending if you're doing aluminum or copper, it can make a big difference. I mean, it could be anywhere from $18 to $25 a lineal foot for now that's the trench, the conduit, and the wire. Again, this is assuming no rock. And then on a water line, you're looking about $10 a lineal foot. Get you pretty close there in the Maybank area. It's kind of falls between, sometimes it's Henderson County, sometimes it's Kaufman County. It depends, but we're pretty close there.
Okay. Keith is asking if our builders are designated specifically for Tilson or do they build for other builders too?
Oh, they only work for us. They're in a Tilson truck. They only work for Tilson.
Yeah, they're full-time W-2 employees. They're not contractors. That's the actual building superintendent.
Michael is saying my ground needs some leveling away from the build site. Is there a problem with me bringing in dirt to accomplish this just prior to the build?
I'm gonna encourage you to let us evaluate that. If we've gone through, and I think specific to this, we can maybe speak if we've already gotten the engineering back. But I'd almost rather wait until the builder has it so he can coordinate what he has around with what you're wanting to do. If you're limited on space, when the builder initially reaches out, that would be the time. I would really want the builder to participate before you do anything else to the lot.
Okay. All right. Scott is saying he's building a Canyon B soon. Wants to know if he needs gutters on his home in order to help with the foundation, or does he not need them?
What's your
That's
opinion?
a mixed bag. I will tell you that it's, I like gutters being associated when we have a gable, but if we're on a hip roof, that morning dew, because we go through the droughts and those periods, but on a hip roof, it'll create consistent moisture content around the entire foundation. Whereas a gable, you're shooting to the front and the back, typically the majority of it. So gutters are kind of dependent on the plan itself and how many valleys we have. We might just do some sections of gutters rather than do the whole house in gutters. But I rather evaluate each house on a case-by-case house rather than making a blanket statement whether gutters are necessary or not.
Okay. Kurt is saying that Tilson is currently building our home. We've noticed some soil erosion from around the foundation corner as rains have come and gone. No soil under the foundation. Will this be addressed at some point?
Yes, we will come in and do a final grade. So a lot of times it's not uncommon that we've done a cut and fill or possibly built on a pad, or we've elevated the forms and we've just kind of backfilled with some dirt to start establishing the proper drainage away from that foundation. But towards the end of construction, as we get septic installed or whatever the utilities are, then we come back with our tractor and we'll bring in some additional dirt generally across the state. And we're going to make sure that we achieve that proper slope away with fill.
Okay. Rosemary is asking if we provide a construction schedule before we start building.
We can. We can provide an overview. Sometimes people want to grab this document and say, oh man, here's the Holy Grail. This is exactly how everything's going to go. When a lot of times it's not, because if we have the impact of weather or contractor availability, if we see an avenue by which we can get something done that's responsible, that won't have a negative impact on another contractor or the home itself, we'll deviate from that. But ideally, I'll tell you, Rosemary, it'd be best that we're coordinating and having good communications throughout the build. Every week, talking to the builder. We expect our guys to be reaching out to y'all, the customer, and letting them know what's going on the job site. So I'd rather guide you through rather than just hand you a document and think, oh, well, this is it, and then we not communicate, because it truly is a partnership going through this to make sure everything's being done in a timely fashion as expected. Okay.
Bishop Clyde is clarifying his question before about the survey. He has got an allowance for the driveway in his loan. So would that need to be complete before the survey would happen?
Thanks for clarifying too, Clyde.
Yes, thank you. So yes, your driveway is going to need to be there if there's an allowance, that means it's in the loan.
Yes.
All right. Jana is asking, is stained concrete a money-saving flooring? Is it cold? Is it slippery?
No, yes, yes.
There you go.
I can't argue that.
It is less than like maybe your higher upgrade wood or vinyl planks, but it's kind of right in there with our level 1 tile, and actually even our level 1 vinyl probably. But it's not, you're not going to just save thousands and thousands of dollars by going to stained concrete. And yes, it's cold, and yes, it's slippery.
Yes, it's slippery.
We'll use rug. It also shows wear patterns, kind of like carpet over time.
It's also going to be an inconsistent color. So make sure that you're not somebody who likes everything to look kind of uniform if you're going with a stained concrete, because it won't.
Yeah.
And as Justin mentioned, if there's surface cracks, you're going to see them. So it's a specific look.
I think we're getting close towards the end, but I know we're up on 2 hours now, Justin, which is a record. It
is a record. Everybody's still okay?
Yeah, respectful of your time. I will stay and answer questions as long. I think we're getting pretty close. So.
Don is asking if we work with solar and water catchment systems.
Not really.
No, we do not.
He's in Spring Branch.
Again, specific to solar, sometimes those connections that they might want are relatively simple. So, but I ideally have people bringing in, and I'm not going to do the solar panels, and I'm not prepared for that. I'm not going to be the best avenue for that. What I have found is people saying, hey, this is what we want to do. And I'll only ask, what is the preparation that I can assist with to make that happen at a later date? And I think that's the fairest way I know to manage that, because we want you to get what you want, much like a generator. I don't think the connections would be that much more strenuous than it would be for a generator. But we can set the stage for success for those other components that you want to bring in or incorporate later.
Okay. And Johnny is asking about septic systems. When do those get installed?
It depends. Sometimes we have customers that had an existing home or a mobile home that they were living in for a while, and we use the existing septic. So they can be done before we ever begin. But typically, if it's brand new, never been touched property, virgin soil, we're probably going to see that immediately after the masonry is completed and or the siding. So sometimes it will depend on where that septic system is located on the property in relation to the house. So if it's on the rear and it's 100% siding, or if it's 100% siding home, we can do that almost immediately after we've done the framing. So that's where the builder, I want him, looking at those angles and opportunities to get those things in sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Joss is asking, is there some way you can install a breaker style so we can plug in a generator for the whole house?
It's typically done with whoever's going to be doing the generator system.
Yeah, I mean, and again, if somebody kind of can feed us kind of what they've researched and what their thoughts are, we can certainly work together on finding out an option. And again, you can start isolating circuit breakers or certain circuits to only operate off of the generator if you're not doing a whole house. Like your freezer might be important. I wish I had a breaker for my heat tonight and possibly my well, but we'll get through that. But I think bringing your thoughts to us, generally speaking, we can navigate through those things and make sure that we're positioning you to make those connections once you've closed relatively easy.
Okay. Johnny had a follow-up question on septic systems and whether they can be incorporated into the home financing.
Yes, they can.
Okay. Shannon is asking, what size slump do you pour the concrete?
5-inch.
5-inch.
All right. Don says he survived the aluminum wire horror of the 1970s and wants to know who still uses it.
I'm glad you said. I'll clarify that, Don. Great. So he's talking about interior wire, or perhaps he is or not. So yes, interior wiring. There was issues with that. And actually, the wiring itself it arced if it wasn't tightened down real tight. Now, what I was referring to on underground, we're talking large, like wire the size of my thumb, big wire that to hook the house up to the transformer.
9 gauges.
Right. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be tied down with a very large lug, probably larger than my index finger, and you're not going to have a problem getting enough torque on that to clamp it down. But yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with using aluminum wire specifically for the permanent hookup to the house. My personal home is done with aluminum wiring, direct burial, in fact, if you can believe that. Aghast, no conduit at all. But I knew what I was doing. I knew what the electrician was doing. I'm comfortable with working with that kind of aluminum wire as long as those lugs can be tightened down real tight. Probably not going to catch me putting in number 14, 16, or 18 gauge aluminum wire in a house. No.
No, we will not use it on the interior. But the other part to that is if you have strong conviction towards it, we do have a copper option for underground.
Yeah, that's why I gave him a range. Says if you want copper, you can do it. But on a large gauge like that, you have nothing to fear on aluminum wire.
Okay.
I bet you 70 or 80% of the states running their undergrounds are probably done on overheads are done off of aluminum now.
Yeah.
It's
almost
just
always.
Yeah.
Okay. Rosemary is actually following up on a question that she asked last week that I forgot to look up for her. So I am very sorry, Rosemary, and I am writing it down right now. She's asking about the distance needed for between the dryer vent and the AC unit on the outside of the home. Justin, do you happen to know that?
This is
we'll give you your answer.
There's not a manufacturer spec. I actually looked this up, and I bet you, Rosemary, you might have stumped me on this one a couple of weeks ago because I got an email about this. There's actually not a requirement in the specifications from Lennox. They do, if you read through and talking to our contractors, ideally they keep it as far away as possible because that lint and everything's blowing out and it's getting brought into that exterior unit. So then at that point, you're going to find it being more of a maintenance issue. We kind of landed on a number of about 4 feet being the best case scenario. And then if you read blogs, because you really sparked some interest, if you were the one that submitted the question over, they started talking about direction of the wind blowing and all kinds of.
Wow.
The blogs get really interesting when you dive into the inspection world and start listening and talk to one.
That is a matter of perspective. I'll let you have yours.
I know what yours would be. And by interesting, I use that term loosely. But no, if we can stay 4 foot, we feel like that's a pretty good distance to try and minimize the negative impacts it might have on the exterior unit.
Okay. All right, so Joss is saying we are building in Montgomery, and the way our house is being built, we have to have rails to pass code. How do I know if they would be wood or metal rails, and also the style?
Also did not plant this one.
So we should have that on the options addendum. There should be a change order or something referencing what those are. And in all fairness to you, I want to make sure that we catch that. If you're under construction already, the builder should know. We've already have materials being purchased for those components. So we can make that really clear if you'll contact your builder and ask him that same question.
Yeah. Or if you're not, Josh, then if you're still in the sales portion, then we'll have options for you to choose from on wood or metal.
Okay. All right. And Keith is saying we have our own plan that we love, but it doesn't look like any of your custom plans. Would you still be able to work with our plan? So Keith, what you're going to need to do is send us exactly what you've got going on, just so we can take a look at it. We've been doing this for a very long time, and we have found that when we do things that are too far outside of what we normally do, no one's happy. We're not happy. You're not happy. Nobody's happy. So we're just going to want to take a good look at those plans and make sure it's something that we feel comfortable with. As long as it's something we feel comfortable with, then yes, we can do that for you. Is that fair, guys?
We'll start with, yeah, that's great. That's fantastic.
When Don
From
speaks,
a pricing perspective, we probably will start with one of ours, just to establish some kind of a baseline.
Mm-hmm.
So don't freak out if they pull out one of our plans and start comparing your plan to that. That's how we do our upfront desktop pricing. So it doesn't mean we're selling you this particular plan. It means that we're going to use that one as a gauge from living area footage, covered porch footage, garage footage, linear cabinets, number of lights, all that kind of good stuff.
Okay. And Jen is clarifying her question from earlier when she was asking us if we preferred a pre-cleared property or a not cleared property. She hasn't bought her land yet. So some of the ones she's been looking at have been cleared and some haven't. And what would the preference be there?
My preference is above the floodplain. That's my preference. So I don't care if it's cleared or not. Truly, It doesn't matter. Just get it out of the floodplain.
And to be clear, if you found a piece of property in an area that you're in love with, we don't want you making a decision based off of, hey, we don't want you to touch it. It's just ideal. If nobody's touched it, we really can make short work of what we need to do there. But don't let that be the deterrent from buying a piece of property if you found it. We can work, and we have worked through those all the time. But I hate when people go out and they buy a piece of land and they automatically feel like they need to go start investing money to make it happen for us. Give us that opportunity to go out there and say, hey, here's what we really need done. And then anything you do beyond that is your choice. So we can partner with you again. I just don't want to waste your money on things that you think might need to happen when they really don't.
Yep, absolutely. And Johnny's clarifying on his generator questions. In Washington, you can have a generator lockout installed on the breaker panel. And he did that past year with his gas generator outside that had a outside plug integrated into the main house panel that he can then choose what he wants to plug into it. So that's kind of what his question was.
Learn something new.
I bet you we can accommodate you just like you were in Washington.
Yeah. And then let's see, Joss actually clarified they are already in the building process and wants to know if it is too late to add an option for a generator.
That might not be the last time you're asked that question this week, Mr. Ordeneaux.
Depending on where you're at, ideally we would know that before we did the electrical rough, because generally speaking, you want to know that up front, because where the panel might be located, if it's an interior or an exterior panel. But I don't think it's an unreasonable question given the circumstances we're under, and I'm going to be going home to a 40-degree home if I'm lucky. So I think asking our builder what that would look like, and again, if you already kind of know what you're wanting, we can bring our electrician in and see what options he might have to accommodate you.
Okay. And then Keith is following up. It looks like this is actually our last question. So he's got his own plans. No, Keith, please do not purchase your plans.
Oh,
you're going to redraw them anyway. And they're probably not exactly what you want to do as they are. So bring them in, tell us what you want to change about them. Because like I said, our drafting department's going to redraw them, because when you purchase a plan online, it's not on the foundation that we designed for your house. It's probably not to the code that is going to be in the specific subdivision, county, city. So we got to redraw it all anyway. So don't save your money. Just bring us a printout of what you want and we'll figure it out.
There you go.
And that is it.
Well, that only took 2 hours. Well done, Justin. Thanks a lot.
Good job, Justin.
For goodness sake, this guy. No, hey, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you, Justin, for covering time of year. I know you've got not just all these houses going on that you're building for these wonderful customers. You got
it's raining inside your house.
So thank you for doing this, man. I appreciate you. Love you like a brother. Dawn, thanks for putting this on. Thank you for getting the word out. Folks, I appreciate y'all so much for doing this. We hope you get something out of these. Share these with your friends and family. I see Mark talking about it's 10 degrees Fahrenheit over in Germany. Yeah, well, it's 10 degrees Fahrenheit here too, Mark. It's cold.
But you're used to it, Mark.
Thank y'all for doing this, and we genuinely hope to soon make you part of the Tilson family. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.